Hello, dear students and my audience. Welcome to Dr. Ahmed YouTube channel. Today, again, I'm recording chapter 8 of Hawthorne's novel, The Scarlett Letter. This chapter is very heart-touching chapter because here we see not just one affected person, but also the second one in a very controlled environment. And so it will reveal the nature of the characters, the problem they are suffering from, and the psychology of these two protagonists, I mean Hester and Dimmesdale, in a very beautiful way. And so we will be able to have a better understanding. So let me show you the chapter. It is here, The Elf Child and the Minister. So that is the chapter that we are going to start with. Let us have a brief understanding of the chapter by locating the colored passages so that we can have a very good idea of that. For example, here on the second page, we have the colored passage. It says, behind the governor and Mr. Wilson came two other guests. One, the Reverend Arthur Dimmesdale, whom the reader may remember as having taken a brief and reluctant part in the scene of Hester Prynne's disgrace, and in close companionship with him old Roger Chillingworth, a person of great skill in physic, who for 2 or 3 years past had been settled in the town. It was understood that this learned man was a physician as well as friend of the young minister, whose health had severely suffered of late by his too unreserved self-sacrifice to the labors and duties of the pastoral relation. So, as I said, that this chapter is going to be very fascinating because here we see almost every affected character standing at one place, that is Arthur Dimmesdale, who is supposedly, rather surely, the lover of Hester Prynne and who is the father of the girl Pearl. She, Hester Prynne, and the girl are also present here, but alongside that, we have another person, that is Roger Chillingworth, who had already met Hester in the jail and had openly revealed him and had decided that he would work on discovering the man and probably being a doctor, as he's a physician. He has learned a lot of art from the gypsies in his absence from the scene. He has come here and is a friend to this minister, Dimmesdale, as well. So that is why probably he is going very well on the issue of discovering Hester's supposed lover and the father of Pearl. And this is therefore a very fascinating chapter in that way that Dimmesdale, even after knowing and having all secrets in his mind, is not revealing anything. And same is the case with Chillingworth. He does have the secret, he does not reveal too. And same is the case with Chillingworth's the secret plans that he wants to carry on. So in this way, under one roof, governor's hall, these people are present, and reader is given a chance to look at each and every character, how that character is behaving, how that character is coming up with the individual unique psychology. That all we are going to have a good witnessing of. So the chapter tells in this paragraph that all these characters are together. Ironically, each one is knowing the other, but no one has the courage to reveal what is the real issue. And that makes this chapter very interesting. Let us go further deep into this chapter. And here we see the paragraph that we have finished again on next page. Let's go and see another small passage. It says, pretty young one, who art thou, and what has ailed thy mother to bedizen thee in this strange fashion? Art thou a Christian child? Dost know thy catechism? Or art thou one of those naughty elves or fairies whom we thought to have left behind us with other relics of papistry in merry old England? The small passage is not that important that should be considered, but however, here the introduction of Pearl takes place to the governor, and that person is asking her, what type of person are you? Are you not a Christian? Why are you behaving and misbehaving? So it means that if somebody is a good Christian, according to the text impression, it seems the child is good, definitely is Christianized, and good things are with him. And if the devil is having a hold of that child is not good. So that's a type of Christian philosophy that has been brought in here again. Let's see more into the chapter. And after leaving one page, we are again here. The paragraph says, were it not, thinkest thou, for thy little one's temporal and eternal welfare, that she be taken out of thy charge, and clad soberly and disciplined strictly, and instructed in the truths of heaven and earth? What canst thou do for the child in this kind? I can teach my little Pearl what I have learned from this, answered Hester Prynne, laying her finger on the red token. This is again one of the beautiful paragraphs where, as we read the last chapter 7, it said that the plan is there that Pearl should be taken away from Hester, in the sense that Hester is a sinner, and the Pearl, being an innocent child, should not be given this kind of punishment, that she should be taught by certain other Christian the good moral values of Christianity. So that is why same is being repeated, and Hester says no, she can do herself, as she has experienced the punishment of sin. So that is why she can guide her child better as compared to any other person in this world. So that's why she pleads the minister that pearl should not be taken from her, while the Christian ministers are adamant on taking the only soul satisfaction of Hester from her, so that she may be taught in a better way. Uh, One can put a question here: was not Hester taught in a better way in a Christian environment even then the same took place? And why then the ministers are not realizing that it is also one of the individualities that can make us undergo any sin? It's not necessary that if someone is good Christian, possibly that person may not be doing. So here I recall the poem Fra Lippo by Browning, because in that poem also a Christian pastor, a minister, runs behind the girls in order to watch them, in order to look at them, in order to enjoy their smile and company. So that's not the kind of thing that only the non-religious person would go behind the girl or go behind the sin. It is possible for any person, any human being. Let's see more there, what it says, what the chapter has in it most beautiful for us. So the situation is that Hester is going to be deprived, but Hester is making an equal adamant, statement that she would not let that girl of her go away. Here we have Hester's husband, old husband, speaking. Old Raja Chillingworth, with a smile on his face, whispering something in the young clergyman's ear. Hester Prynne looked at the man of skill, and even then, with her fate hanging in the balance, started to perceive what a change had come over his features, how much uglier they were, how his dark complexion seemed to have grown duskier, and his figure more misshapen since the days when she had familiarly known him. Now, this paragraph puts Chillingworth as a villain. So one way of describing this paragraph is that the writer intends to show him as a villain of the piece, villain of love. So that is why his features are shown to be uglier, his complexion is duskier, and he doesn't look so good and nice. So that can be author's intention to make him look like a villain. But then it can be the intention of Hester's own view as well, that she is thinking now Chillingworth is going to create a big trouble for her, and that is why she is not looking in a favorable light on him. And on the other hand, definitely young, beautiful people will be appreciated more in the story as compared to the people like him. But the actual thing is that old Roger Chillingworth might have been cheated or not. That's a separate question. Fate might have dealt him with a wrong way. That's a separate question. But after all, he's the husband of Hester, and therefore he needs to know who is the source of the sin, and he needs to, put a question to Hester. Why did she do so? Equally, Hester is not responsible for this sin because she thought that her husband has died. And so fate is putting all these characters in a very strange situation, but it's to be seen which character behaves in what way. Chillingworth is trying to do the thing in a conspiratorial way, and Dimmesdale is trying to hide the things because it's very difficult for him to be a minister and to accept the sin also. And then equally, Hester has stopped him. But overall, the courage of the woman Hester is very great here, that she's looking at the people who are standing before her. One her lover, other her husband. But still, she's not revealing any secret. She's not saying anything. Even she's standing at the critical moment that her daughter is to be snatched from her. Let's see more about this. And let's go down the passage and see what does the interview has. And here, by a sudden impulse, she turned to the young clergyman, Dimmesdale, at whom, up to this moment, she had seemed hardly so much as once to direct her eyes. "Speak thou for me," cried she. "Thou wast my pastor, and had charge of my soul, and knowest me better than these men can. I will not lose the child. Speak for me, thou knowest, for thou hast sympathies which these men lack. Thou knowest what is in my heart, and what are a mother's rights, and how much the stronger they are when their mother has but her child." And the Scarlett Letter, "Look thou to it, I will not lose the child, look to it." This is the most passionate and sentimental paragraph spoken by Hester by addressing to Dimmesdale. Now, all of us know that Dimmesdale is the lover. But then you see, there's no request made to the clergy. There's no request made to Chillingworth. There's no request made to anybody, but the request is being made to Dimmesdale with the words that he knows everything. Now, this is very simple, that Dimmesdale should come forward and say, "Yes, I'm the father of the child," but she wants that he should show his good nature to these people, and so that Hester should not be taken away from him. She puts a request to him by quoting that he is noble, he is loving, he is the true Christian, priest, and that is why he would like to spread love instead of hatred, dislike, and to deprive the mother. And she in a way shows her resolve to devastate also, that okay, whatever the decision is made, I'm not going to separate myself from Pearl. And she in a way takes him as a party. She takes him by her side. Imaginatively, she's thinking that at least he should be the person who should speak for her, and that we have to see whether he speaks for her or he does not speak. And here you see, going down, we will see the speech by him. Dimmesdale says, "Oh, not so, not so," continued Mr. Dimmesdale. "She recognized, believe me, the solemn miracle which God hath wrought in the existence of that child. And may you feel too what methinks is the very truth, that this moon was meant, above all things else, to keep the mother's soul alive, and to preserve her from blacker depths of sin into which Satan might else have sought to plunge her. Therefore, it's good for this poor sinful woman that she hath an infant immortality, a being capable of eternal joy or sorrow, confided to her care, to be trained up by her to righteousness, to remind her at every moment of her fall, but yet to teach her as if it were by the Creator's sacred pledge that if she bring the child to heaven, the child also will bring its parents thither. Herein is the sinful mother happier than the sinful father." Well, this passage goes to show Dimmesdale to be a person who is a true priest and who is a true Christian, that he is speaking on behalf of the people who are suffering. According to him, if Hester is having Pearl, it means that Hester is doing something for Pearl to bring her up as a human being, as a good human being. It will be a reward of Hester. Possibly, Hester may be going to heaven because of this service. And similarly, Pearl will be going to heaven because of Hester's services. So in this way, the child should be left there. And here, I am reminded Chaucer's parson in Hold the Company of 29 Characters in Chaucer's prologue to Canterbury Tales, that he is the very person who is the incarnation of a kind, loving, and a human pastor or Christian priest. The same thing is being shown by Dimmesdale here, though he cannot come forward in an open verse to claim the fatherhood and the wifehood of Hester. But even then, he delivers a very impressive speech that we should not try to spread the sin. We should not try to increase the severity of the sin. We should see what is goodness in the sin, and that goodness should be appreciated. That is why this is the very thing. And the ending sentence, let me show you the sentence of this paragraph, is really very interesting, where the writer says, "Herein is the sinful mother happier than the sinful father." So in a way, he goes to refer to his own self as well, that he's not happy if Pearl is with Hester. Hester would be happy, but he's not happy on all these situations. So that is the kind of situation in which one priest has a different view, other priest has a different view, but the priest is trying to show himself. These three small lines say, "The little baggage hath witchcraft in her, I profess," said he to Mr. Dimmesdale. "She needs no old woman's broomstick to fly with her." Here in these short lines, the chief priest is saying, okay, look at the girl. She's very fast, very active. She seems to be some fairy. She seems to be some magic girl. She's not going to be a normal child at all. So it means that Pearl is getting extraordinary qualities which are being recognized by these people as well. Okay, and now let's see what other decisions are given, what other things happen in this chapter. The main thing has gone, that Dimmesdale has spoken, Hester has spoken, and both psychologies and passions and emotions and sentiments we have studied what was going on, the theme of the chapter, the purpose of the chapter also has been gone. But here, something more is there. This is a paragraph in the same chapter where the topic would change. The affair being so satisfactorily concluded, Hester Prynne with Pearl departed from the house. As they descended the steps, it is averred that the lattice of a chamber window was thrown open, and forth into the sunny day was thrust the face of Mistress Hibbins, Governor Bellingham's bitter-tempered sister, and the same who a few years later was executed as a witch. Hist, hist, and she, while her ill-omened physiognomy seemed to cast a shadow over the cheerful newness of the house, "Wilt thou go with us tonight? There will be a merry company in the forest, and I will nigh promise the black man that comely Hester Prynne should make one." The reference is coming up in this passage about Mr. Hibbins, certain Mr. Hibbins, who's the one arms with the tempered sister, who is punished by herself. Well, she is now calling that he should come to the function which is going to take place in the forest tonight, she says, and she says that the certain role she should be playing. So see, on the one hand we have these priests, on the one hand we have Billingham the priest, then we have the governor priest, and we have Demasdale also. We have Chillingworth also. On the other hand, we have this woman who is receiving punishment but still continuing with her desirous job of becoming a magician. She's been punished and she's now wanting to hold some kind of function where she's inviting Hester. So the two women has been given to us. One, Hester, to understand what a woman is. On the other hand, this Mrs. Hibbins, to understand the other side of the women, that she's involved in that kind of witchery. And she's living in the Garner house and she is spending her time there, and she is not being hated by the people in the same way as Hester is being hated. So on the both sides, sin is there, but one sin is punished in a different way, another sin is punished in a different way. That's the hypocrisy of the religious people, that they try to impose upon the common people for their own benefit, in order to save certain people, in order to punish the other people. So writer keeps on writing this chapter. Let's go to the end of this chapter and see what further things we can have. The chapter has ended, of course, and here is the last passage. But here, if we propose, suppose this interview betwixt Mrs. Hibbins and Hester Prynne to be authentic and not a parable, was already an illustration of the young minister's argument against sundering the relation of a fallen mother to the offspring of her frailty. Even thus early had the child saved her from Satan's snare. So this is how the chapter ends. It's a comment from the writer that in both the cases, the thing has happened that Hester has been able to save herself. Hester has been able to save her child, and even saving herself from Mrs. Hibbins as well. So in that way, sin is always there. Sin has been happening, but punishing people in that way for a constant humiliation, that is something ironically very bitter to be realized, and that's what the writer wants to convey to us. So that calls for the change, for the reformation, and for improvement of life of human beings. And here are the women who are punished for their magic, possibly women who are punished for their illicit relationships. But is there anyone who is giving happiness to humanity? Are they not human beings? There should be, of course, their mistake, they should be punished for that. But that much humiliation, difference of humiliation, that the writer is not in favor of. At least the text goes to generate. It's not my personal point of view. I'm not a Christian, I'm a Muslim. But still, here is something which calls for redressal, for improvement, for bringing things for the love of humanity and peace, not for punishment, hatred, and dislike. Okay, so that's it from me for this day. Hope to see you in some next video.